Switch the main title, and then is it recording now? Okay, cool. So we're training Miley here how to run.
She's been doing everything today.
Yeah.
Helping me out.
No, she's gonna run the booth, and then so Life22 here, live from the REAP Farmers Market with John Policastro of Flanigan Farms, and you raise animals, livestock, right?
Right. Well, technically speaking, what we actually consider ourselves as grass farmers. Yes.
Okay.
And the reason for that is the backbone of absolutely everything that we raise in livestock depends on the grass.
Okay.
And the plants that are growing in the field. That's not to say that we're harvesting and selling grass, but
Do you?
No.
Okay, you don't. Okay, you don't get big bales of like hay and stuff you sell.
No.
Okay.
But the backbone of any effective livestock operation is the quality of the soil and the grass. So everything we do is to try to build that soil and build kind of healthy ground, and from there your animals will grow off of that and be that much healthier. So at the end of the day, at the end of a season, our fields, our ground should be better than when we started the season.
Okay.
And that's kind of the goal of why we go about it. And that what you put into the ground and the soil and what grows in those grasses is then what ends up in your animals, in your pigs, your cows. And so healthy in, healthy out, garbage in, garbage out. So,
Gotcha.
And I think that kind of encapsulates the bulk of what we do. But I think it's also important to note, because we raise chickens, pigs, lambs, goats, a few cattle, and turkeys seasonally. They don't all eat the same things, and that's important.
Okay.
Cows, for instance, a lot of people kind of don't think about it or realize it, but cows are herbivores, so they strictly eat grasses.
Right.
Grains, which are how most cattle are finished, are not grasses. So we can talk later about why grain-fed versus grass-fed and the difference in that. Pigs, though, and chickens are omnivores. So they will eat both plants and animals.
The mob discovered that with pigs, didn't they?
So, and the reason that's important is because grass-feeding pigs isn't the same as providing them maybe the full nutritional requirements that they have. And same with chickens. You say like chickens eat meat. Well, chickens eat bugs. Chickens pick at everything that's on the ground. They'll eat grasses and stuff, but they're also going to eat.
Somebody told me if you raise chickens, you don't have fleas in your yard that your dogs can get and bring back to the house because they eat all that stuff.
Yeah, it's actually very true. Having chickens, your kitchen garden is a great way to do things. My philosophy is everybody should have chickens. If you have a little garden, have chickens. They're going to supply tremendous nutrients into the soil through their own manure, and they're going to eat a lot of the harmful bugs and keep the plants clean. They're a great addition, and they're going to often provide you some great eggs. So it's a win-win-win.
Yeah. I was somebody actually just told me that the other day about chicken fertilizer, and I'm thinking, like, I always think of chickens like pigeons. You're supposed to stay away from pigeons and other like bird fecal matter, and then like.
Obviously, any waste product of manure, in and of itself, is not something that you're, that you're going to want to eat as is. But there's a vast difference between the kind of manure that's kind of produced, with certain feedlot operations or certain farms, and then the kind of manure that might be produced by your backyard chickens or in a grass-fed operation. And again, it goes back to that phrase of garbage in, garbage out.
Right. Where pigeons are like crows; they're eating just kind of stuff they find on the roadside.
Right. And it could be, and again, I think part of this is always just a little bit of a fear factor on the part of our society right now in general. These fears of these different diseases and things like that. So they're afraid of anything you touch is going to get you sick, and it's just not true. However, the way that certain plants or animals are raised in agricultural locations lead to these outbreaks, and the reason we're such proponents of smaller local food systems is because you break down that cycle, and meaning every year you're going to read about or hear about these foodborne illnesses that come out.
Salmonella, E. coli,
and they're often traced back to spinach that came from somewhere, and it takes them a long time to trace that back, because it turns out that there are often a lot of farms that sell under certain brand names, and then those brand names are sold to multiple states. So what happens is, by the time you realize you have a problem with E. coli or something, it's now affecting thousands of people in multiple states, and it takes a long time to trace back because you can't just go back to one farm.
It was that one farm that
it could be multiple. So in the meantime, everyone's in a panic, or they start thinking well, obviously we shouldn't eat any spinach anymore. Spinach is bad. It's got E. coli. And again, it's not true. But in a local food system,
where there was a salmonella outbreak with chickens through, like, wasn't it like a Walmart outbreak that was big national use?
It could be eggs and things like that. In the past, there was mad cow disease, which again, all these things get traced back to often confinement operations or big agriculture, these food distribution systems where they go out to multiple locations. That is not to say that Flanigan Hill Farm could never produce something that would have
an adverse effect.
But the reason we're talking about small local food systems, the most I could affect might be 50, 75 people, right? Like an outbreak is contained. You can't affect the food system with local farms. If I didn't do a good job with what I do, you simply wouldn't buy from me anymore, right? You could go out and you could see the actual pigs and cows and the conditions they live in. If you go buy a package of chicken or hamburger in the grocery store, you have no idea how those animals were treated, where they came from, or even if it's just one animal. You could be buying ground beef from 15 cows, 100 cows, 1,000 cows. You don't know. It's mass produced. And there's really no accountability back to where the food comes from. It's this quest to produce the cheapest possible product. The consumers demand it, so the farms and the businesses try to meet it. You can't even really blame the farms in some ways, because it keeps coming back to this is what customers demand.
And they have to do this to survive.
They keep finding ways to cut corners and squeeze more out of less, get bigger chickens, fatter cows, more corn out of an acre, everything, because the demand for cheaper food by consumers is driving so much of this. But again, there's a lot of different tangents. But my point originally was that when you have these large food systems, it is easier to potentially have a terrorist attack on the food system that would affect thousands of people quickly, or just incidental or accidental, like E. coli outbreaks and things like that are going to affect a lot of people. But small local food systems largely eliminate that, because even in an outbreak of something, it is self-contained by its very definition, right? It peters out fast because I only can sell to a small group of people that are in this local community.
And you have 75 people you have to contact. That's hey, we had one person with this, yada yada, and it's easy to squelch that. You don't know the millions of people that bought from that grocery store chain that got it from that one distributor. So I mean, it's
Well, and conversely, the risk that every farmer in this farmers market right now takes is that accountability. They put themselves out there. They are held accountable to every person that walks up to buy from them. They have to answer questions from their consumers. Those consumers can come see their farm. That doesn't happen in any other one of these environments where people sell things. People sell almost any goods for that matter, but particularly in food. Like when you go to a grocery store, there's no accountability to the farmers or the middlemen or anybody who produced that as to whether they used whether they used chemicals or they didn't, whether they used illegal immigrants to work, whether they used underpaid people, who knows, whatever it is, whatever your cause, is or whatever. It's just the point is there's no accountability back to, because you don't have to. All there is a finished product packaged with usually a little picture of a green hill and a red barn on it that says Smiley Happy. And
it's Smiley Happy Farms.
Maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. The point is you don't know. Whereas when you do shop from your local farmer, there is a level of accountability and understanding that can go into it.
Because these are your neighbors.
So
you can, and neighbors let you come over and check out. Hey, come over and check out my new pool. Hey, check out my farm.
That's you can walk into our farm. It's just small. It's basically you're going to be just looking at some fields with some animals in them, and try walking into it and trying to get a tour of a major swine operation or a confinement feeding operation for cattle. Like, first of all, even if they let you in, you're going to be putting on boots and hazmat gear and stuff to get in it, because outbreaks of disease, they're
hoof and mouth, all that other stuff.
They're petrified of the spread of disease and so on. And of course, I'm generalizing this, but that's largely why we got into this and why we're doing it and why we believe in it.
Awesome. Well, that works. So now last year you were the president of the board, and now this year you're off the REAP board. But it's not to say that you got elected out. It's just you step down and let somebody else take a try.
So this REAP organization, which I'm sure your viewers kind of know, this Rural Enterprise Association of Proprietors, was developed to kind of really foster small business growth, and the farmers market was a side component of that. And now we've become mostly about the farmers market, but it's really been about, I've looked at it as, how do we grow this local farmers market so that more people in this community will want to come buy locally here. And I think to do that, you have to have a strong board, but you have to constantly foster growth of new board members, and that means allowing other people to have a voice. So I was elected to the board and served an initial 2-year term, and then I was elected as president, and then served another 2 years as president. And then this past year, when my term was up, instead of rerunning again, I thought, it's like, if I'm always going to criticize politicians for being, late in the lifetime in these positions, it seems, maybe I should put my money where my mouth is and step aside and let other voices be heard.
Sure.
The tough part of that is that you feel like you give up your voice or your influence in things, and if you feel passionately about something, you want to keep, influencing it. But it really was an opportunity for someone like yourself to get on the board.
Right.
And even if the market goes in a different direction, or one that I might not lead, it doesn't mean that that's a bad direction.
Right.
I have to be willing to step back and let other people do it, just as other people had to step aside at some point to let me do it. And I think that in the long run builds a stronger organization, because now you have a chance to both learn from it and then add your voice and insight and experiences to it, right? And so that will, I think, in the long run help, an organization like this, stay strong, for the future.
And somebody else's direction that they may take it, and you can also, as a viewer of somebody else experiencing maybe a lesson learned, you could look at it with a different perspective and say, this person tried this, which I didn't agree with it at first, but then this happened, and I think it could have been solved by doing it this way. And that, you see what I mean? And it just
absolutely
just viewing somebody else.
If your organization isn't strong enough to withstand changes in its board and its leadership, then it probably wasn't strong enough to begin with.
Right.
It should be able to survive those sort of changes. In fact, if anything, it should be able to get stronger and grow.
Right.
And so again, that was kind of part of what it is, and I feel, and I'm actually quite happy with the changes on the board, and I feel like things are really going in a positive direction. Even though I admit it's tough to not be part of some of those decision makings, and so on. But that's good growth for me too.
Right, because now you get to focus on your farm, right? And because it's extra paperwork, things like that.
Well, and you just put trust into the process, and my hope is that other people that have been on the board a long time, when their terms come up, will look to cycle off and get other voices in too, because it only works if we all do that. Right. We all get a time and a tenure on it, and a chance to influence and take things forward, and then move it on to the next people.
Right.
And this is a good organization that's doing and is really working to do some positive things, and kind of this local food system, local group of vendors.
And with helping the local economy. So how do you feel that the farmers market does that? I know I try to get everyone's take on how the farmers market helps the local community. And you've already kind of specified that with the local food system.
Right. Well, to me, pure and simple, it is about 100% of the money stays in the community. When you talk about a lot of other larger stores, let's say chain stores, chain restaurants, things like that, a certain percentage of what gets made is going back to
wherever home base is.
Right. It's leaving the community. And any small business knows, whether they're part of this market or not, any local small business, then money stays here. The old classic mom and pop mentality, but it's true. Like, mom and pop live in the community. The money they're making at the store, they're shopping and spending here in the community.
Right.
The people that come in to shop at the store, theoretically bringing money from the community, spending it in the community, and it stays here. And nothing could be more true, particularly than your agricultural vendors and your crafters and those sort of things. They're buying, or they're finding their raw materials and inputs here in the community. They're
growing it out of this local soil,
right? And in a perfect world in my mind, like, that entire cycle stays here locally. That the nutrients that I put into my soil and grow my animals stay as close as possible back to that. Now you can argue all day long about what local means, and whether you're talking about your town, your city, your county, or whatever. But I think that this works best.
Local obviously is on the other side of the globe. So.
Right. Yeah. But so define it how you want, but I think the smaller the sphere, the better overall that it is, because we learn to help each other. You build community by having that sort of interaction and betterment. If all we ever do is take our resources and push them elsewhere, then we're really depleting overall. We deplete the soil when we do that. We deplete our communities when we do that.
Sure.
In fact, I'm not just plugging my blog on our Facebook page, the Flanigan Hill Farm, but we did recently write one of those kind of musings as I was contemplating what about that if we're touting and farming about trying to keep resources on the land, you keep the carbon there, you keep the nutrients there, you're constantly trying to build soil because that just helps your overall land. Why is it with our kids, those kinds of resources, why are we always trying to, in our high schools, convince them that the only way to truly make a difference in the world is to go out somewhere else, go into college and go away, go out and save the world, as opposed to why not save our own communities? Like, if this is a good enough community for our parents to have lived in, clearly, and then therefore us to be born and live in, clearly, why isn't it good enough for our children to live in? Why are we not putting that kind of pushing that philosophy a little bit more about we shouldn't take our best and brightest and send them all off somewhere else and say the only way for you to truly realize your potential is to go elsewhere? I mean, why are we doing that? Why are we allowing our schools to push that mentality? Like, maybe we should be telling and pushing our kids more about, hey, why can't you stay here? Why can't you be part of the community that raised you and invested in you and put those nutrients and resources into you? Now you stay here and grow and do the same thing. Like, that's my soapbox, but it's something that we've just recently been, kind of been mulling around my mind. And,
because I mean, you send something out, but then all of a sudden now you've got to buy something from elsewhere because you've lost it, you've depleted it.
Right. We have companies here, in the Olean area that recruit everything from engineers, nurses, doctors, and yet we have kids who have been born in this community and raised up who are in those very professions. But we've we've encouraged those people to go out elsewhere and make their career somewhere, and then we're out recruiting other people to kind of come in and fill these voids. And I'm just saying, like, again, I get it's natural, it's a pie in the sky notion, but I'm just saying in general, maybe we would be better off as in all these communities if we did more to encourage some of the resources, these people that we've raised and put so much into. I mean, I think you need a healthy mixture, right? Like, you do need people to come from the outside. You need new faces and new voices.
Sure. That's one of the I was like 7th grade social studies class. I remember learning that like no country or no one place has everything that it needs to be able to sustain itself. So there has to be foreign trade or local interstate commerce and things like that. But to an extent,
right? I don't want anybody to think that I'm speaking about some isolationist idea.
Build a wall around Olean.
It's not at all. I think you need new ideas, new cultures, a variety of different people and cultures and mentalities. But I'm just saying
at
the
same time,
that
you have
we
to be
shouldn't tell
cognizant
all of our children that the only way to truly make something of yourself is to do that elsewhere, and the only people who hang around home are the people who aren't good enough for something. That's I think a wrong philosophy for us to have, and I think if we started just speaking a little differently in our high schools and so on about the real benefit and value of changing your own communities, take your best and brightest and let them invest right back into the communities that invested in them. Like, there's just nothing wrong with that. Then you get generations of families again in communities. And I'll tell you what, there's been nothing better than my kids having access to their grandparents right here in town. I'm glad that my siblings moved further away, but I'm so glad that we stayed around and had that. And I hope that my own children
stick around.
Right. And but we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. Just an idea. That's all.
So we've touched on what Flanigan Farms offers. No, grass farmer. No. Some people would also consider that a rancher, right? Are there people that do that same thing? That's something that popped in my head a little while ago.
That's not a new idea.
Right. Okay. I didn't know if there is a difference. Like, no, ranchers only do this. That's completely different than what we do.
No, I mean I mean, it's just what we're not. The amount of land that we are farming on, typically ranching is, much
acres larger.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, we actually only have about 8 acres of our own, and we lease another 12 or so, and we do all of our rotational grazing and everything on that mountain. That's why we limit. Gotcha. You have to limit the amount, of animals and livestock that you use, and the principles
crop rotation
true. Cycle. Well, the principles of true grass farming is high intensity grazing in small cells, that you have the right kind of stock density on it, and you move frequently with rest periods in between. The grass should not be overgrazed,
depleted, and then yeah.
Right. Our general approach to it is that most of the farms you drive by where you see big fenced pastures with cows in them are not being grazed properly. That's the let's just fence in the whole pasture, let them out. So what happens is the cows eat the grasses they like best first, and then those never get a chance to truly regrow because they're always biting those down, and then they start eating the other ones, which then usually causes the weeds to grow up, the things that they don't like. So that's usually why you can see on those pastures like paths where they've walked time after time after time, and scrubby,
and it's
worn
always
down.
And it's always the further out you go, the higher the grass is, because they're staying closer to the barn, because that's where they're going at.
Right. So one of the things we just did is we only had one small barn on our farm, and we actually just tore that down. Our whole goal is to be totally portable and mobile with everything that we do, with the thought that anywhere around a barn, a gate, any permanent thing, the land is never going to be as healthy because it's always going to be trampled down, worn out. It's just by its nature, by its definition, that's where things will be congregated. So in an ideal system, in our perfect world, everything is
very
mobile.
nomadic.
Yeah, everything is mobile on the farm, so that nothing. It's how you break the life cycle of parasites in the ground. If you're constantly moving your animals, like things like worms, things, intestinal parasites, things like that, the life cycle doesn't get a chance. But
to deep root itself.
And to get into the animals, because they often have to get into the manure, hatch, grow, to the larva stage, change, get into the animal, get ingested. But if the animals are long gone by then,
they die
those
off.
Larva stages, they don't have a host
they become
to get
fertilizer
into.
again. Right.
And so we'll often, and then having multiple species, because multiple species eat different things, like I said before. So we might move the cows through an area, and then we might move the chickens through after that, and they'll eat all that larva and everything, and they're totally different parasites affect chickens than cows. Goats and lambs eat two different things, so you got foragers versus grazers in there. And then the pigs, we usually put those on an area that we want to basically plow up, and we can leave them for as long as we need to again, to get that area basically plowed up, and then we'll move them out, and then you have basically a garden where it was left. So it's just kind of trying to manage all that, and by no means do we get it all right. We're learning daily on
and then climate change and having to keep all of that like in your peripheral.
Right, but it's a goal and something we're striving toward, and that's part of what makes it fun. It's the learning. You make mistakes, and then you can't be afraid to acknowledge it's a mistake, regroup, and then go at it a different way.
Awesome.
So we were all over the map with that. I don't know if I actually directly answered a single one of your questions.
No, that's fine.
No,
I mean that
paths.
definitely got a lot of people like, John's the talker of the market, but he's very philosophical and has a lot of like well thought out ideas. So glad to have you here. It just is a part of the market. So
I'm glad to be here, and we hope that these types of things will draw more people down here. A lot of variety, a lot of great stories. You got to come down here, meet your local farmers and your local vendors and producers.
Yeah, there's a story behind every slice of beef, every tomato.
Absolutely, there is, and you get to be part of it when you come down here and shop here.
Yeah. So, thanks for coming on the show, John.
No problem.
8 to 1 every Saturday until the last Saturday in October, and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you down at the REAP Farmers Market. Thanks again, John.
Thank you.
Yep.